Welcome, everyone, to the second meeting of the 2023 Task Force on School and Campus Security. Mariah, please call the roll.
Senator Deneen.
Here.
Senator Nemes.
Present.
Senator Thomas. Senator West. Representative Maddox. Here. Representative Sharp.
Present.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Representative Wilner. Co-Chair Wise.
Present.
Co-Chair Lewis.
Here. Any members have introductions or comments? Need a motion to approve the minutes? Last session, last meeting? All in favor? Aye. Motion's approved. All right, our third item there is, I think they're going to present together, but Kentucky Center for School Safety, Office of the State School Security Marshal, and Student Mental Health. If you all will come to the table, introduce yourself, and proceed with your presentation.
Mr. Chair, my name is John Akers. I'm the State Director for School Safety.
Mr. Chair, my name is Ben Wilcox. I'm the State School Security Marshal.
And we'd like to thank you for inviting us to share a few things with you today. We do things kind of just a little differently when Ben and I present. We like to basically give you some basic information, and then like we did last year with the Interim Joint Committee on Education, we'd like to throw it open for discussion and find out what you all have on your minds. So real briefly here, one of my concerns that I have over the years, and I go back to my history as being a principal for 25 years in Fayette County, I worked with many SRO officers around that community and found them to be wonderful to work with. It hurts me when I read research out there that really doesn't capture what happens in Kentucky. You have some resource officers in other states that have made some bad decisions. But I'll tell you this, that we have resource officers in our state here that think those kids are their children, they're part of the faculty, and they're part of the community. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do about it? So my office sits right next door to the Department of Criminal Justice Training, and they have a really good video group over there. So I talked them into helping me produce a video, just a short video about our SRO officers in the state and what they do. And I have to go back to Senate Bill 1, the School Safety Resiliency Act, and just say what a model that has been in our country. And it's been a model, as Ben will tell you in a few minutes here, about what they're doing as far as training our SRO officers. Now, I'm at a technological disadvantage here. I'm told that this sound system in here doesn't work well with our, with the laptop here. So I'm going to try to jury-rig this there and put our microphones down there. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this. If not, we will send it to you and you can watch it on your own videos.
Make good decisions.
You know, I've seen the videos, we've seen them in class, we've seen them in training of, SRO officers walking in and just throwing a kid to the ground. That's not us. We don't do that. I can tell no, our department does not do that. We, for the majority of the time that we have contact with a kid, it's really positive. It's a kid that they need help, they need guidance. They're having a bad day, they're going off on admin, and I'm like, listen, man, I saw you an hour ago, you were fine. So let me try and talk to you. Just de-escalate you, so then you can go back to class and maybe not go to safe or be suspended for the rest of the day. We're trying to get these kids to be the best version of themselves. And if we can do that, anything that we can do to help that, we're gonna do it.
Hey, what's going on?
How are y'all doing?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Good.
Could be doing better.
Could be doing better. How's school going today?
Pretty good. And it's going.
My first couple of years here, I thought I had to be that law enforcement officer that walked the straight line, no nonsense. You're going to do this no matter what. And I wasn't interacting with kids, right? I wasn't getting them to communicate with me. So I started doing this video on Fridays, Friday afternoon vibes, right? And so the principals are involved in it now. The teachers are involved in it, and kids, you know, with video, and say, hey, Officer Wesley, is it my time to be on Facebook, you know, or social media with you? And doing that, those kids have opened up, right? And I've opened up to them. And, you know, just like, for example, all the kids now say, Officer Wesley, if you ever get in trouble, we got your back. Used to when you're on the street, you know, a juvenile comes up to put your hand, you know, oh, get away, don't be touching me. Well, here at school, you can't do that. You have to be a little bit softer, you have to be nicer to them. Because really, that could be your son, it could be your daughter, it could be your nephew or niece, right, or grandkids. So you got to love them. You got to put your arm around them, love them. And the more I do that, the more they enjoy that, and the more they appreciate that. And they just don't see me as a police officer or a law enforcement officer, and they see that I can call Officer Wesley at 4 o'clock in the morning if I need to, and he'll answer his phone or he'll come and help me. And so that has helped tremendously.
Get out of your way. Do your thing. I've been here 15 years, and I haven't put handcuffs on a kid in over 10 years. Because, I think that when we have to deal with kids in schools, I don't think we gain anything from placing handcuffs on kids. I can still press charges on kids. We can still administer consequences, meaningful consequences, without having to take away the dignity and integrity of the kid, right? And so I think it's really important about how we administer our jobs and how they receive it. And over the course of time, you can build a culture in a school district to where they can welcome you and they appreciate you without having this perception of, oh, those cops are just there to put us in jail.
On our side, doing the on-site assessments and working with schools directly, the SRO is a huge asset, not only to us, but also to the schools. When we go do on-site reviews or assessments, we'll talk to the principal, we talk to the counselor, we definitely talk to the SRO. The SRO is responsible for the safety of that school just like everyone else is. And they do a phenomenal job of making sure those mandates are followed. We'll go in and ask them what's going on with the school, what assistance do you need, and they're on top of it. They're making sure doors are closed. They're making sure that exterior doors are maintained. They're making sure the check-in process is there. They're patrolling the school. So they're a huge, huge asset when it comes down to making sure the mandates of the bill are followed and working with our office, and we love working with our SROs. They're phenomenal.
As a former principal for 25 years, I find that the SROs are a part of the faculty. They're not just an outpost that's out there. They're part of the fiber of the school. Each of us have our own roles, but our SROs, I think, more often or not, are considered to be counselors rather than cops that are in there trying to find out how many kids we can put into the paddy wagon and take them down to juvenile. Many times we find these officers out there being able to connect with kids that we can't connect with as educators. And we think that's a very important part of this thing. And one of the frustrations that I have is when you look at the research out there about SROs around the country, whatever, you see one picture that's being painted there, but what I don't see out there is how can you put a metric on things that have not happened? How many times do you think that maybe there's been something that's been averted because an SRO officer pulled that kid into the office, talked with the kid? And I can tell you also, as a principal, I would have the SRO officer in my office with a kid that potentially could be arrested. And we worked with the parents and the kids and the SRO officers so we didn't have to send the kid through the court system. But we had a good partnership with the parents, with the SRO, and with the school administration to avoid these things. And so I think that's something that gets pushed off to the side, how many times we were able to avert this rather than send the kid down to juvenile and let them deal with that.
We win. We win. Okay. One of the things that's unique and special about our department is being housed in the school district, paid and funded by our school district. We don't go anywhere else, do anything but school resource officer type jobs. And so it allows us to build long-term meaningful relationships with kids. And so when we talk about long-term and meaningful, the two conditions have to be met together. So just to give you an example, if you have a long-term relationship with a kid and it's not meaningful, then it's not really fruitful. Conversely, if you have a meaningful relationship with a kid and it's not long-term, then it's not fruitful there either. And so what it allows us to do is develop these long-term meaningful relationships with kids over just vast periods of time. So I'll give you an example also. A kid who might be an at-risk student in middle school or elementary school, by the time they get to the high school, we're the constant in their life because administration changes, teachers change, kids in the schools change, but we're their, we're their constant in their life. We're also able to better mediate situations with that kid because we know that kid. We understand their kid. We've dealt with their parents. We understand their background, their history, their home life. All of those things all help us to become better at what we do in the school.
Let's go orange. I see these kids 8 hours a day, 4 or 5 days a week. Sometimes longer if they go to the football games or basketball games. And so I get to see how they are like. Because sometimes kids at home, they act a different way. But without that supervision when they're here, they could act a different way, kind of like their true self. And so I get to see that and help mentor them, just be there for them, be that kind of consistency in their lives a bit.
Yeah, that's a lot taller than you, Bestie. You almost got it.
I think people will be surprised at how many positive encounters we have. I mean, we have a group of students who mean mugs everyone in the rest of the kids in the school. And she tells them, they're like, oh, why are you mean mugging me? She says, well, I don't talk to anyone except for my 3 friends here at school and these 4 cops. Or we have kids that I've talked to maybe once, said hi maybe once. And he tells his parents, oh yeah, I love these cops. These are my besties. I've even had parents walk up to me and be like, hey, are you Officer Tran? I was like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, it's a complaint coming up. I don't know why. And she's like, oh my God, my son loves talking to you. He talks about you all the time, of how much you've helped him and all this stuff. And he's like, wow, I'm doing good. And it makes me really happy to see that kids are going home to kind of talk about their SROs in such a positive light to their parents.
I haven't met an SRO that's not in there for the right reasons. They're there to help kids. They're there to help families. And as soon as you walk, I was an SRO. As soon as you walk into that school, you become part of that family. And it's your school, it's your kids, and you're there to protect them. You're there to help them, just like they were your own kids. And I think that's the perception that we have to have of our SROs out there, because that's what they're doing right now in the state. And all you got to go do is talk to someone that has an SRO in their school, and they're going to fight you if you think you're going to pull an SRO out of their school, because they're such a valued asset for what they do. Because we're, again, building those relationships, bringing people in that can help in other ways, and I think that that's what's very important for people to understand.
Ben's tied into the national network as I am, and it's almost unheard of for SROs to have 120 hours of training. I know SROs from other states and say, well, we had 15 hours of training that was there for us, and then Ben turns around and talks to somebody and says, well, we have 120 here. Part of that training involves with how to deal with special ed kids, how to deal with diversity issues, how to deal with de-escalation issues. What can we do to, and again, this whole thing comes under the umbrella of prevention. And the more that we can prevent things, the better things that are going to happen as far as these kids' time that they're in school.
Having that 120 hours of training is important for us because it gives law enforcement officers so many different avenues. So one of the things that impressed me so much with Senate Bill 1 was the holistic approach to the whole student, and how we looked at not only police tactics, but also we looked at mental health training, crisis mediation, students with special needs, and those kind of things. And so it taught police officers how to be better SROs because they had a different approach and they had a different mindset going into schools about how to better mediate those situations with kids.
All right, what do you want me to do? I'm helping. I think that SROs is the most important position in law enforcement. I say that because you have to be able to interact with kids. And we change kids at the school. We educate kids at the school. We teach kids about reading, math, algebra, social studies. We have to be able to educate those kids on law enforcement. We're building that bridge between law enforcement and juvenile justice system, not to send kids to the juvenile justice system, but to help, to educate them, to say, hey, police officers are normal people. We're educators, we're counselors, and we're coaches and role models. And it's a blessing to be able to do that.
Take it over to Ben.
Well, I'd like to kind of piggyback off that and kind of go over some of the SRO training that we're doing at DOCJT, some new innovations that we're going about this next year in SRO training. And I really would like to call out Deputy Wesley, who was in the video. He just didn't put that hairnet on for the actual video. I think he has one of those hairnets in his gun belt, because if you look at Facebook, he's always involved. And I think that he just does a fantastic job. Like I said in the video, I'm a former SRO. I started in 1999. Started 3 months after Columbine in Montgomery County, actually where Officer Barrier's at now. When I walked into the school, basically they looked at me and said, what are we going to do with you? And I looked at them and said, I don't know what I'm going to do. We have come leaps and bounds in the last 20 years or more on training for our SROs. I want to make sure that people understand that SROs are a specialized unit. Just like a detective, just like a SWAT officer, just like anyone else, and probably the most specialized unit that you can have in law enforcement. It takes such a special person, and that's why we're seeing such good results from our SROs within the state. But I want to go over with you, within the School Safety and Resiliency Act, the curriculum called for foundations of school-based law enforcement, threat assessment and response, drug abuse and abuse, school resource officers as teachers and mentors, youth mental health awareness, diversity and bias awareness training, understanding students with special needs, de-escalation strategies, social media and cybersecurity threats, trauma-based action, and basically all of that was required in the 120 hours of training that we do at DOCJT. We put all of that into SRO 1, which is the first 40 hours. When we wrote the curriculum for 1, we did not write the curriculum for 2 right afterwards. We started training police officers, and we said, what do you need most? You've been in the school, you've had this training that's required by law. What do you need most? You would have think they said more active shooter training, more firearms, more tactics. They looked at us and said, we know how to be cops. We need to know how to be SROs. And they wanted more mental health. They wanted more trauma. They wanted more threat assessment. If I talk to principals around the state, they'll tell you they use their school resource officers more for counselors than they do anything else. School resource officers are not allowed to do discipline. It's an MOU that's in the law. They do no discipline. They're there as protectors, but they're mentors and counselors as well. And that's what's so specialized about our training. We do active response training for active shooters. We do firearms training, because all of this that they are required to do and work with kids, and 99.9% of the time that's what they're doing, is being that counselor mentor, is that if the worst could ever happen, they have to switch and become that tip of the spear to protect our kids. And that's why it's such a specialized unit. And I can tell you from experience, these folks speak from the heart when they talk about those are your kids and you are part of that school. And I'll answer any questions you have about SROs.
Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Officer Wilcox.
Yes.
First of all, I want to know, I am glad to meet you. Now, we've never met. I've known Principal Akers now for over 30 years, and I think he's just a fine, fine man.
I believe so too, yes, sir.
But I want to compliment you for the work that you do, because I will tell you, I have never heard anything but good things about you, and people speak very highly of the work that you do. And I want to show you that I tend to be an outlier. I tend to have a different point of view than most of my colleagues. I'm fine with that. But I understand that role that you play. I will tell you, as far back as 2017, when Senator Mike Wilson was chair of Senate Education, we had the first Senate Bill 1. I was an advocate then for SRs having guns in schools. We had that in Fayette County. We had that in Fayette County for a while, and I'm fine with that. I think I can advocate for that and say at the same time, I do think we have too many guns in society, and we need to reduce our guns in society. I have no problem saying that either. But I think the work you do while having guns in schools, protecting our children and making them safe, you do an excellent job. So I don't really have a question for you, but I say I've never met you, but I always want you to have heard good things about you, and I applaud the work that you do.
I definitely appreciate that.
That's what I really want to say.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I should be done after that, right? That was awesome. I do appreciate that, sir, very, very much. Thank you. one of the things that we are planning on doing for next year with our SRO training is the Marshal's office is going to be taking over the SRO training. We're still housing it under DOCJT. We will still have instructors from DOCJT assisting with it, but our goal is to make our training regional. We want to make it regional. We want to make it into a block scheduling. It takes a long time to explain this, but what the point of it is we want to keep our SROs in their buildings during the school year. So we're going to be making our training going on during the summer and making it easier for our SROs to receive that training. And we'll be utilizing our regional staff that does assessments to assist with that training. So we're trying to work with, it's one thing that we hear from superintendents all the time, we don't want our SROs pulled out of the school for a week. And we haven't been able to do that, but if we try and separate out regionally, then we're going to be able to do that. So say a little prayer for me. We're going to make this work next year, and I think that it's going to be a real good thing. If I could move on to what we do for the actual Marshal's office and our risk assessments, I'll just hit this very quickly, and then I'll let you ask questions. We're on our 5th assessment. We'll start our 5th assessment this next school year. Our report is not done yet. It's supposed to be out September 1st, so I don't have any direct numbers for you, but I can tell you I'm extremely proud of our students, our staff, our faculty, because they are doing a phenomenal job of following the mandates of the School Safety and Resiliency Act. Our compliance officers go into every school in the state of Kentucky. That's 1,327 schools. And we do the risk assessments. We work directly with the schools, and I truly, truly believe the reason why we have such a good outcome on our risk assessments is the relationships that we built with our schools. We are not, like it's been said many times before, the hammer looking for the nail. We'll come in and say, look, this is what needs to be fixed. Let's work together on fixing it. If we can't help you, John Akers with Kentucky Center for School Safety will send his crew in, and then we're going to come back and check again and make sure it's right. It's not just posting that picture on the wall that says, well, like if you're going to a restaurant, this is a C restaurant. No, we want everybody to be at 100%, and that's what we are continually working towards. And we couldn't do that unless we had a buy-in from our schools and our staff. Now, the challenge is always, I don't know if you all have heard this before, but there is some turnover rate in law enforcement, in bus drivers, in teachers, in staff. So, I have a presentation I make to school staff, and 4 years ago when we started this adventure, I said, I'm going to have to change this presentation up. I haven't had to, because it's new ears every year that hear it and have to hear it. And I'll end on this, and then I'll let you all ask questions, is that I've had the opportunity to travel around the United States, several locations, and I give that same presentation to different states, and I've had a big outcry from several states to say, how can we mimic what we're doing in the state of Kentucky? How can you make this work? And a lot of legislation has been passed in other states that look a lot like what we do in the state of Kentucky. We've worked with several, sent them all our information on how we made it work, and they're running with it. Of course, one of our biggest and proudest things we do is the Handle with Care program. The Handle with Care program is all across the United States, all across Kentucky. We're the only state that has it statewide. We have a lot of states that are trying to figure out how to make that work, and the state of Kentucky, with the help of Kentucky State Police, has made that happen for the last 4 years and will continue to make that happen. Our office is the biggest cheerleader for it. We send posters out. We visit with departments regularly. We train in-service and basic recruits on what the Handle with Care program is. We have videos for it, and we hold folks accountable. I'm married to a counselor, and if you can give a counselor a heads up that there may be a problem with the student the day before, it's just like giving a police officer heads up of what's going to happen when you go to a call, and that's just amazing for our kids, and that's what we're all about. So I'll be happy to take any questions that you have at this moment, and I'm just very, very happy to be here, and I appreciate you very much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate
you. Senator Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marshal Wilcox, John Akers, thank you both for being here. Marshal, you mentioned you don't have the report yet, as we know. It won't come out till September, but I'm sure you still have numbers, though, from the previous year.
Yes.
This is a working group or task force, focused on funding.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us where we are lacking in numbers in terms of SRO positions? I know we got a workforce issue, like you said, across the board. But with that, I'm sure you had numbers from this previous year of where are we still needing bodies. What do those numbers kind of look like, if maybe it's a rough estimate, and if you have the magic wand with the legislators up here for funding, what will be a request as you would like to see?
Absolutely. We can go by the numbers that we had for last year. I made a presentation on the passing after HB 63. We were at 51% of campuses covered at that time. We're a little different now. John may have some, he also comes up with numbers as well. But as for the report from last year, we were at 51%. The total numbers, I think I presented last year, was about $50 million for to fund all the officers in the state at 1,087 campuses in the state, and to fund the officers needed was around $25 million, if I remember correctly. But that was from the report that we made from the HB 63 report.
Okay, John, anything you want to add with that?
The last numbers that I heard was 683 SRO officers, and to give you a comparison, when I started, we had 150 SRO officers, so we're up now to 683. And you're so right about the pool of applicants that are out there. Just because they are a certified and sworn officer of the law, they may not be suited to work in the school. So we want to be sure that they are very selective on who they bring in to work with our kids.
And if I could add, and the report will state it out much better, is that it comes sometimes very confusing because you have the amount of campuses, and then you have the amount of officers, and then you have the amount of schools that are covered by an officer because there's more schools on that campus, so it can be very confusing. So the report, hopefully did a very good job of kind of spelling that out. But we're at our best point that we have been in the last 4 years. I can put it that way.
Can you tell me about streamlining, vetting the hiring process? Are there improvements that need to be made with that? I know legislatively we probably can't control a lot of that, but is there anything right now in terms of background checks? Is there things that are becoming a hindrance or speed bumps to not get someone hired on quick enough to fill a position?
Not that I'm aware of it, not by getting hired or getting into the academy. I think that the report last year from the HB 63 was an even number on the issues on getting hired was funding and or personnel, and it was kind of equal on the survey we sent out to schools. But I'm going to give you numbers from this last year, which is 22 to 23 when the report comes out, and now I'm hearing that there's school districts that have hired 10 to 15 officers in the last month. So actually the fact that I'll be able to give you some numbers in September, Mr. Akers will be doing another count in October, then we'll be able to see a lot more even before the legislative session starts again.
And if I could add to that just a few things here. When we have a new officer that comes on, it takes him 3 years to be able to be a certified SRO officer. Okay, in the meantime, what do we do with a rookie that comes in? Well, Ben's shop and my shop put together an SRO mentor program for the new ones that are coming on. And so we will assign a retired SRO who's been through 1, 2, and 3 to work with that officer and to work with the principal. Also, this past June, we had a conference in our down at Richmond for SRO officers and principals on how do you make this work. And we had probably 15 different breakout sessions, and it was very highly attended. We had well over 300 people there, and we're very proud of that. So we're keeping this thing going as well. But I just want you to know that it's a partnership between the principal and the SRO. If they don't G-haul together, then they have problems. But when they work together, they really have a good system going on.
Good. Mr. Chairman, one more question.
Go ahead.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate taking all the questions. In terms of, and I think Marshal Wilcox, you mentioned it's being a specialized unit. And then, John, you just mentioned kind of about a rookie. Thoughts, if we are in a workforce issue, former federal law enforcement officers becoming SROs, former military becoming SROs, volunteers wanting to become SROs. Since you've been in this now for 4 years, thoughts on things that maybe is being discussed amongst constituents across the Commonwealth after we see issues that happen in neighboring states to our south? Mm-hmm. Your thoughts about opening up the applicant pool?
If it's former law enforcement, as long as they come in and can pass the POP certification, as we would say, through the state of Kentucky, The way we look at it as in nationwide is the same way. As an SRO, it is a certified police officer with specialized training. When you come to the academy and you receive basic training, that's exactly what it is. That is a full amount of the least amount that training you need to get onto the street and become a police officer. I would suggest against taking any of that training out. I think that is a must, just because there may be some areas where it looks like it matches up to law enforcement, but it probably doesn't training-wise. And we would have to make sure that training matched up with our training to get that certified officer we're looking for. School Safety and Resiliency Act is a phenomenal bill, and I just want to see it fulfilled, because I look across the United States and there's nobody else got that. And so to me, as long as we're making sure that whoever's coming in is having that basic training and it is certified with what we're doing in our state, and then receiving that extra SRO training, then that's what we need.
Thank you. I was looking at, in terms of abbreviated training for maybe court security that we use.
Yeah.
If someone had that federal law enforcement background training, have already came into a position and wanted to be an SRO, could there be an abbreviated course for them? Or would it still be going through?
They'd still need to make sure that they fall under. And if you come in from another state and you have enough credits to match what our basic training is, you're still going through some abbreviated training with basic officer skills to make sure you're caught up with what's in the state of Kentucky, which we've had a lot of officers from out of state come in and become SROs, and they'll come in and do their 3 weeks of basic officer skills, and they're in the schools then. Great. And starting their certification process for SROs. And if I could bring up one more thing I forgot to tell you, we're very excited. We have counselors come in to teach our SROs. We don't use former cops to teach trauma-informed care and counseling and things of that nature, mental health. We bring in the experts. And I had one of our experts pull me to the side after a class, and she says, "Do you know I have counselors that have no idea what training these officers have?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "We have counselors. I talk about what I train police officers on." And the counselors go, "What are you talking about?" And so we actually are putting a training together and going to the State Counselors Association meeting and talking to them about, hey, the guy or gal that's in uniform, they have 12 hours of trauma-informed care training, mental health care, and you really need to work with them. And so the actual presentation is going to be counselors and SRO as a powerful team. And so we're hoping to now, if we're starting to get that influx of officers to come in, the people in that school to realize what their potential is. And so we're very excited about that.
Thank you so much. I just hope you don't lose officer barriers to Hollywood after the video, but thank you so much for your questions and answering the questions I
Thank
have.
You so much.
Representative Wilner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation and for the wonderful video. That was lovely. And I'm really impressed with the amount of training that you're providing folks. I'm impressed with the mentoring. I'm impressed with the partnering with the school counselors, and in that way, I want to just put in a plug. Don't forget the school psychologists and the school social workers, because that should be all part of the interdisciplinary team as well. And you may remember I have been critical and nervous of armed police officers in schools. And one of the reasons is that nationally we see data, this is not in Kentucky, but nationally we see data that when there's an armed police officer with full powers of arrest in schools, that we see more kids winding up in the juvenile justice system for what could have been a school disciplinary issue. And so, as you say, other states aren't having 120 hours of training. They're not having the trauma-informed training and all this really outstanding work that you're doing. But do we have any way of tracking kids going from school into, the school to prison pipeline?
That's not something our office tracks. John,
Yeah.
do you have any?
Yes, in fact, I was anticipating this question. I have the data right here. So
Good.
I can bring it up.
Fantastic.
My glasses on so I can see the text messages here. According to KDE data, there were 2,395 contacts with SROs, and there were 120 arrests. So I think that constitutes maybe less than 5% of the contacts in the state of Kentucky. And that gets back to what I said on the video and what I said to y'all earlier, that principals work with their SROs to try to find ways to get the parents involved and see if we can avoid these things. Nobody wants to get those kids downtown, but the bottom line is sometimes some have to go down there and get into the juvenile justice system like that. But I think it's very important to understand that there's just, well, the video spoke to that. These folks really see themselves as counselors, and they do work with the school psychs and they do work with the social workers as well, and we support those groups as well. For some Ben.
Well, and that's the beauty of a SRO, is that if a school calls a 911 or law enforcement, an officer walks in that has no connection to that school, there is more chance of that officer making an arrest, because you walk in, there's a crime, I make an arrest, I take a kid out. If you have an SRO, that SRO more than likely knows the background of that kid. As a SRO, if someone said, well, you got to watch that one, that's the one I went and talked to. And those are the ones that would come in my office on a Monday morning and say, Deputy Wilcox, can I sit in here and talk to you for a minute because I'm about ready to go off? And I'd say, absolutely. And we talk about what happened the weekend before. And that's when they went back to the class nice and calm, because we understood the background. There is much more apt of a not having an arrest if that SRO was there to understand what that child's going through. So I think that's what the beauty of it is.
Thank you. That's really very helpful and very encouraging to hear that. And I'm also encouraged by your response, that we're not going to take any shortcuts in hiring folks. We're not going to lower standards. And I think, we've had so many workforce challenges and workforce shortages across disciplines. And I think there's always a temptation to just say, oh, well, does that teacher really need a master's degree? And, yes. And does that SRO really need all of this training and all of that experience? Yes. And so I just really want to thank you and commend you for making sure that the standards remain high to keep our kids safe. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Thomas.
Well, Lisa, my question was a great segue. But from a different standpoint. Mr. Akers and Officer Wilcox, we're talking about the juvenile justice system. And you mentioned earlier shortages and the need for more SROs. And so my question to you is the same question that we're dealing with as a legislature in the juvenile justice area. What we're seeing is that in rural areas, we've increased the pay to $50,000. That we're getting good applicants and plenty of people who are applying for positions in the juvenile justice areas in your more rural communities. But when we talk about communities like Louisville or Northern Kentucky, that $50,000 pay isn't enough, and we're still having some shortages there. It's been an interesting day for me because I've had the benefit today of talking to the two largest school districts in the state, Lexington early in the morning and then Louisville during our previous meeting. And I'm wondering, and help me out here, is the pay for school resource officers enough that we can attract good applicants across the board in our rural urban areas, or do we need to increase the pay, which I've advocated in our juvenile justice system, so that we're paying school resource officers higher salaries in, say, Louisville or Lexington because of the challenges they face in their school districts compared to your more rural districts? If you can comment on that, either John or Mr. Akers or Officer Wilcox, I'd appreciate that.
Well, from the HB 63 survey that we took, the average officer's SRO's pay in the state of Kentucky is $38,000 a year. As for opinion on if we should increase it, any increase would definitely help out someone that has to have the amount of training and patience and sacrifice of going into it. But yeah, I definitely agree if that would, I don't think I could disagree with trying to increase pay to get folks more in line to come to work.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Deneen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Akers, I've worked with you in the past as a principal, former principal, and I do want to thank you and and the Center for School Safety, I think you all do a wonderful job of laying out really situations that any school can follow. And I just want to applaud your efforts in not only providing a great service for others to follow, but the follow-up work that you all do. I know you hire retired principals and others to go out and to visit schools and to ensure that they are following protocols that will provide our students with the safest environment, and our staffs and our children. So I do want to thank you for all of that. You've been doing this quite a long time. I'm retired now, and I've worked with you, I guess, a decade ago, and you're still at it. And I want to
We can
thank you
keep
for
those
that.
ages down a little bit.
Yeah,
if you
so
don't mind.
we're both getting a
Thank
little
you.
bit long in the tooth, but I can tell you this: you do a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Officer Wilcox, do you see the SRO training? I know you mentioned that you do it regionally, that you do have some professional development for those SROs to come regionally. Are you seeing, since it is such a positive program, are you seeing schools and districts start to incorporate that on the local level where your SROs are working with other wraparound service providers within that district as a part of the ongoing PD that's in those schools? Are you seeing, are you all
Absolutely.
being called upon to do a little bit more of that than maybe you have in the past?
Absolutely. We train SROs. We have a portion of our the training that actually is dedicated to the Office of State School Security Marshal. Our compliance officers during the summer and during the year, we will go out and train school systems, and what we see is the more we train, the better their reports are when we go in, because it's that outside agency that's coming in and working with them. And we try to instill that in our SROs. I'll have an SRO say, well, I'm just having trouble getting my teachers to close their doors during instructional time. And we'll pull them aside and say, have you explained to them why they need to do that? And the light bulb goes off. Then we get a phone call, and they said, well, I'd had 10 minutes with staff, and I explained to them what layered security approach is, why we do check-in processes, why do we check people at the front door, and why the last resort is to make sure you have your door locked. Now they don't have a problem. So utilizing our SROs and our compliance officers to go out and be that other entity to come in. Sometimes it's that different tone of voice or that different quality that you have in your profession to let folks know, and that's working very well. We want our SROs and our folks to outreach to as much as possible because they are part of the community. So majority of your school districts, when they start up this month, will probably have their SROs presenting to their principals and going over exactly what we do and the School Safety and Resiliency Act and the access control and things of that nature. So yes, the answer to your question in a long way is yes.
Thank you very much. I think that's critical for the other wraparound service providers, from your mental health providers that we see more and more entering our schools, to have that working relationship with the SROs, who in turn have that relationship with the students and their parents and the administrators and the staff. So I just want to thank you. I think our SRO program is really an ideal model for the nation to follow, and I'm very glad to say that in the districts, schools in the district that I represent, the SROs are just absolutely outstanding, and I want to applaud you all and your efforts to maintain that Center for School Safety and the follow-up work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Representative Sharp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Marshal Wilcox, it is no surprise to me that you have put together an absolute fabulous program here, having worked with you in the past. So doesn't shock me one bit. I do have a question, though. I understand there's 51% coverage over all the campuses in the state.
As of last year's, yes.
As of last year.
number. Mhm.
What are we doing to increase that?
The increase is the district's working either to start their own police department or working with local agencies to start putting officers, as what HB 63 called for, put officers into the schools.
Are you meeting resistance from various school systems?
I don't think we're meeting resistance at all. I'm not running into any school districts that just say, we're from flat out ain't going to do it. We need to figure out how to do it, is what we're running into. And we've seen, I've got to say kudos, we've seen some school districts that have scrimped, saved, put together, and made it happen. and gone out and said, we don't know where we're going to find these SROs. And then they come out of the woodwork when they find out that little Timmy's grandpa just retired from KSP, and they offer him a job to come down to work Monday through Friday, weekends off, no summer work, and we're starting to fill the schools up with it. So I think it's definitely a goal is what we're trying to reach, is getting the right people in and continue to work towards that goal, and we're building as we go.
Do you have hard goals set now to achieve 60%, 70%, 80%?
The hard goal is 100% as per legislation, but in our office we train and then we count them. So, and we'll work with you any which way we can to help you find them and such of that nature. But that's about as far as we can go as for recruitment and things of that nature.
Well, again, I think you got a great program. Talking to a relative of mine who is an SRO up in northern Kentucky, I can tell he's like a big kid in there, and he's having a blast. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. It's been very elucidating. The bulk of my question has already been answered by virtue of the fact that we do not have the current numbers that will be provided in the report, but there was one aspect to one of the answers that you gave that I wanted to kind of dig in a little deeper on. And if 51% of the positions were filled, and based on the last numbers that you have, I understand that, but something that I had come across when reading indicated that August 2 years ago, so in 2021, 57% of Kentucky school districts didn't have SROs. So kind of what I'm asking here, and you may not have the answer, it may be an answer that you'll have in the future when the report comes out, knowing that 51% of the positions are filled, what does that look like in terms of the number of school districts overall? Is it higher than that 57% of the school districts? Just kind of trying to get an idea of, if there are any areas of particular non-compliance that need additional help or resources, or kind of what's going on with that. Thank you.
If you want to answer, I can answer too. Again, it's one of those difficult questions. We're talking about how many campuses we have covered compared to how many schools we have covered. And if you're reading the report that came out in 2001, 2022, our count was how many schools was covered, and that may be an officer that's covering 3 schools because they're sitting on a campus. So those numbers will be more this year. Don't have the exact numbers right now, but will be more. And then, John and his group tracks a lot of where the coverage is at compared to high school, middle school, and elementary school. So I don't know if you wanted to. I think we're really close on covering all middle and high, but I can't really speak to the exact numbers on that right now. But no, that 57% is the amount of schools that are actually covered. So like I said, when the report comes out, I hope it explains it a lot better than I can right now.
Yes, sir. You had indicated as well that there are school systems and school districts that are hiring right now that aren't even reflected in those numbers. So, hopefully it will increase. And, I'm grateful for, the efforts that are underway to keep our students safer.
And I can give you more accurate detail on how many school districts have SROs. And they might, like what Ben was saying, they might be high school and middle school, but we still need to backfill with the elementaries right there. So I can provide you with county school district information if you like, and independent district as well. If you want that information, I'll be happy to provide that. If somebody will just send me a request on that, I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Director Akers, Marshal Wilcox, good to see you here again. We've had some good conversations in the past. And I want to dig in a little bit as a task force on how we're going to meet this challenge of having, first off, when we're talking about the SROs, having one in every school. It's been my observation that we've got quite a bit of disparity among our school districts about financial resources. We have, if you look at what I'll call the golden triangle, the I-65 corridor, we have an area where property assessments have increased dramatically. We have other parts of our state are seeing the complete opposite. So it's really a challenge for them to come up with those funds. You mentioned that we probably would need about $25 million to cover. Is that what you said? About half of 50, about $25 million, I believe, to cover an SRO in every building. However, we've got some districts who are already, and this is a challenge I think we as a task force need to look at. Some districts are already meeting the goal. Anderson County, in my district, has an SRO in every building. They have a unique situation there. Sheriff receives funds for collection of property taxes, uses those funds to help pay for SROs. That's his decision that they've worked out in that school district. But other districts aren't as fortunate. So I think we as a task force, how do we allocate those resources? Because I guarantee you, if we start sending money down to school districts for SROs, the ones who are already paying for them are going to say, well, shouldn't we get reimbursed too? So I think I'm just going to bring that up as a challenge that I think we've got to address to try and figure out how to make that work. And another question I've got is Senate Bill 1 has specific requirements for the building had to be met. You've got 5 years in now of doing these inspections. During the time you and your team identified other areas that you think maybe we could add to that list? Are there other areas in the school building that we can make improvement on? I'll give you one example. Maybe I'm wrong. I know that the doors have to be locked, but there are differences in door locks. Some door locks, you manually lock that door, but the more expensive option is you have an automatic door lock. Mm-hmm. I mean, have you seen specific examples of things that you think we could use to strengthen Senate Bill 1 going forward to make our schools more safe?
Well, we've seen such a gamut of, when we first started, we were having schools just trying to get locks on their doors. And we've seen improvements in school districts that have electronically locking doors on every door. We've seen them, where officers can open the front doors with, a code now so they can get in. So there's been lots of improvements since the $18.2 million that came out that kind of got everybody square to where they needed to be. So there's just such a gamut of different devices that could or could not. We just basically look at the schools, and if one's working for another school and another school's looking at it, we'll put them in contact with each other. But I don't have anything specific to go over right now. We do keep a kind of a log of the different innovations that other schools are using that we could share in the future. But our biggest thing is if you've got the materials and you've got the process that you're using them. A lock that's not locked is no good, no matter how much it costs. So that's what we mainly focus on. But we have seen a lot of innovations. We got a lot of calls from schools about the film that would go over that's not bullet resistant, but it holds the glass together. We had schools call on that, and so we called the manufacturer just to see, and the manufacturer said, well, make sure and check and see if they got it or not. And we had some schools that called and said, hey, by the way, we've got it. Because 15 years ago, we had a principal that had some extra money, and they put it on the window and never told anybody. So we are seeing a little bit of that as well. But I don't have a specific list. No, sir. Sure.
Yeah. And you mentioned the bullet-resistant film. I think that's one thing. That's just an example of something that we could look at. Also, we have schools in our state that do not have the vestibules, the foyers. When you enter the building, you have direct access to the entire building. I know those things are expensive, and I'm going to throw out I've got one more question, but I want to throw out a suggestion. And I know Chair Petrie and Chair McDaniel may get me, but maybe we need to look at the possibility of setting up a pool of funds. The school districts who are deficient in these areas can apply for grants. That's just a thought, something to think about. Because the ultimate goal is to keep all our children safe. Doesn't matter if they come from an affluent district or not. We want them all to be safe. And I believe I've already asked my other question, Mr. Chair. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Senator Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Tipton, thank you. I appreciate those comments and those recommendations. Real quick, you mentioned the Handle with Care program. Huge fan. I know we didn't mandate that in Senate Bill 1. But I know KSP is doing a terrific job, as well as other local law enforcement offices or departments. I'm hearing, though, Jefferson County is not maybe being as cooperative or engaged in Handle with Care as some other law enforcement agencies across the state. Is that true? Are you seeing that? And if you had any conversations to improve that relationship, if you're hearing that.
We can't discuss directly what's on about any specific district as per what's on the risk assessment. I think the numbers will show that all the school districts are signed up for Handle with Care. So if there's a lack of interest or if there's a lack of officers doing the handle with care notification, then we'll be happy to work with them. Like I said, we've got posters that go out, we've got stickers that go out. We'll train whoever needs to be trained. So if there is someone that's deficient in that, we will be happy to work with them. Our risk assessment basically covers, are the schools signed up for it? Because if the school's signed up for it, any law enforcement agency in the state can utilize it. That's the beauty of it.
Perfect.
So, if you have a student that's at a Jefferson County school, just for example, and they're staying with a grandma at Oldham County can make that notification. It'll go to a Jefferson County school.
Good.
So, but yeah, that's anybody is deficient, we'll be happy to work with them.
If you can look at that with Louisville Metro PD, nothing. I see my friend Chuck Truesdale back there. Is nothing against the district, but more for the police department. If what I've been hearing is feedback from others. So, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, may I respond to Mr.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Senator Tipton, Representative Tipton, I'm sorry. I support all that issue about target hardening, but I also think that what goes on inside the four walls of the school greatly affects what type of security you have as far as physical plant's concerned. So I'm going over to the training side of this thing a little bit and say that one of the things that we know as principals is that we're losing principals after 5 years in their jobs. And so like Ben was saying, we're all the time training a whole new group of principals coming in, and that gave birth to a program that I've got going on. We're starting into our third year on it, the Principal Mentor Program. And you're right, I picked up some colleagues that were 20-year veterans as principals, and we trained them up in Senate Bill 1 and School Safety Resiliency Act. And we're now offering a free service to the school districts where we have a mentor with that rookie principal, so that they can work with that, not only with the rookie SROs, but with the rookie folks there. We're finding high turnovers in the guidance counselors areas. And so we're trying to come back with our version of the threat assessment training, which we springboarded from the Bill Modulewski and Dr. Marissa Randazzo's model. They had that the Dewey Cornell model, the Virginia model, and the Secret Service model all springboarded from that. And so we have that out there as another service that we can provide there. We still do, and you probably received, thanks to Yvette, sending out of our annual reports to everybody, that our Safe Schools Assessment Program, where we send a 6-member team there to judge basically what's going on as far as the climate and culture is concerned. The number one strategy for school is the kid having a trusted adult that he can go to, or she can go to, period. That's the biggie right there. For every one school shooting we've had 25 that have been averted because somebody broke the code of silence and came in. I also want to put a big plug in for Homeland Security and our partnership with them with our tip line. I had a little extra money, so we printed out 63,000 posters and 600,000, I'm not lying, 600,000 magnets that can go in refrigerators with our tip line on this thing. So we want to be sure we saturate our our schools with all information, that they can get this information on any kind of things that could happen outside of school and inside of school on this tip line. And we also have a direct line for the 988 number for their suicide hot tip line as well. But I just wanted to kind of get those things out on the table here. One other thing too, since Nashville happened, our increase with private school requests have just grown exponentially. Now, we've always been very sensitive, trying to help out best we can. We've done training with our private schools, and they're always invited to our training, so it's not a us-them thing. It's everybody coming in. They pay taxes. Why not have their kids safe as well? So that's our philosophy on that. But the bottom line here is that we've had more training being done this last calendar year, now that we're back out in the streets, so to speak, in the hallways, that we're really, really pleased with what we need to do, but we can't keep up with the demand that we have out there, but we're going to try our best.
Thank you. Anyone else? Gentlemen, thank you all. It's been a great presentation, a lot of good discussion. Appreciate your hard work, and we look forward to continuing this task force and the work that's involved in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do want to call one special attention. Ben and I have been working so much together. As you saw in the video, we both had our blue suits on. So I called Ben this morning. I said, "What are you wearing today?" So I just want to get credit that we have not look like the Bobbsey twins here.
I do have more than one suit, though. I just want to tell you that.
Me too.
My 8th grader picked this out for me. It's good colors. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our next item on the agenda is student mental health. Mr. Courtney, if you come to the table and introduce yourself, make sure your green light's on there, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, is it getting me? Here we go. They didn't give me a budget for a video here today, so give me just a second to find my PowerPoint. All right. Well, good afternoon. My name is Matthew Courtney. I'm the policy advisor to the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support at the Kentucky Department of Education. And I was asked to come in today and provide an update on KDE's elements of the School Safety and Resiliency Act and how that implementation is going. So I prepared a brief presentation, and then I'll be happy to address any questions that you have. The first element of KDE's implementation of the School Safety and Resiliency Act is the development of the Trauma-Informed Toolkit. So we were directed by the SSRA to create this toolkit. This is a resource that lives on our website and covers all of the different categories that you see listed for you on the screen. You do have access to these slides, and all of those are linked to the direct page where you can find specific resources for each of those items if you want to go in and look and see what that looks like. Those resources are provided, of course, for free for districts to be able to access. We consider this very much a living resource library. As we learn new things and our partners across the country create and test new best practices for trauma-informed education, we add and continue to develop this toolkit. We have also supported districts in the implementation of their trauma-informed education plans. So each local board of education was required to develop a plan for implementing a trauma-informed approach in its schools. As part of our partnership with the University of Kentucky's Center on Trauma and Children, CTAC, we did work with them to complete a voluntary review of these plans. So as it currently is structured in the law, KDE does not have the authority to collect plans or review them or provide feedback. So we partnered with CTAC to do this voluntary review. Of that, 131 school districts, so 76%, voluntarily gave their plans to CTAC for review. And here are just a handful of takeaways from the draft report that we've seen from CTAC. We know that most of these plans do identify trauma-informed team members by role and or name, and both in some instances. 60% of plans were copied identically from templates provided by community partners. And so in the coming school year, we'll be doing some work and messaging on how do we refine our templates, how do we customize our plans to better meet the needs of our individual districts. 40% of plans were able to identify which policies would be reviewed or revised in order to develop trauma-informed disciplinary policies. So really less than half are really taking a hard look at that discipline, and we'll be providing more technical assistance this year in that area. 38% of plans specified how districts would ensure that all students are well known by at least one adult in the school setting. So as we've just heard, that is a very important element of trauma-informed education and of school safety. And so we will also be working through our technical assistance channels to help districts come up with new ways to do that a little better. And then 54% of districts reported collaboration with the state police Handle with Care initiative, documented that in their plan. And so that number is, of course, going to be a little different than what we've just heard compared to the actual numbers that the Marshal's office will be able to report on. But in the plan, a little over half have documented procedures for that. I was also asked today to bring some staffing level numbers. And so we went through our records and tried to create the best report for you, the most accurate report for you. I will say, before I go into these, that there is some flexibility in how districts can code different employees in the system. And so these numbers are unlikely to be 100% accurate. It's, of course, also summer. And so those numbers will be changing in the next coming months. But these come from the 2023 professional staff data and classified staff data reports. According to this report, we have 23 clinical psychologists employed directly by the school district, 1,727 comprehensive school counselors, formerly known as guidance counselors, 411 school psychologists, 146 school social workers, and 216 other identified or licensed social workers. This also does not include partnerships. We do know that many districts have partnerships with regional mental health centers to provide ongoing access to clinical psychologists or social workers in the school district, but that would not be represented here because they would not be considered school staff.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm looking at this slide. As I look at these different positions here, I see different areas of expertise. And of course, we all know that guidance counselors have a lot on their plate, helping students with career pathways, college prep, and all. And it seems our staffing levels seem to be heavily geared toward those guidance counselors. In your work at KDE, is there any effort or getting any information about? Is it just a shortage of those other professionals? Is that what's leading to this?
I do think that there's a recruitment and retention issue for those other areas. A comprehensive school counselor can really only do their job in a school, and these other categories of licensed professionals can do their work elsewhere. A couple of other things that are likely a factor to this, we talk broadly about school-based mental health professionals, and there's a pretty lengthy list of certified areas in the law that classify as a school-based mental health professional. And so that's why you see these different categories broken out in the report. Part of this also is that we do have an expectation that we have one comprehensive school counselor for every 250 students, but we have a goal of having one school-based mental health professional for every 250 or more students. And so the difference between an expectation and a goal, I think also has some trickle down. So I do think that there are probably some policy levers that the legislature could look at to increase some of that. Looking at that goal, looking at that funding, looking at recruitment and retention for these different positions.
Now, you may be going there in a minute, but I know a lot of districts utilize entities in the area, in the district, community-based. Do you have any numbers on the amount of community-based providers that are coming into the school?
Yeah, so that's not a data element that KDE collects at this time. So we don't know for sure how many are out there. Anecdotally, I would say that it grows all the time. We're regularly in contact with districts who are looking for ways to increase access to these services in their schools. Those community-based mental health centers are a really important part of that, and I would encourage you to work with them as well to see kind of how their services are being deployed in the school more directly.
Senator Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew, on the school-based mental health providers, school nurses, do they fall anywhere in this realm? I'm looking at positions up there. What about school nurses? Where are they captured at?
So school nurses, we've not included here because their role is not primarily school-based mental health, it's physical health. Okay. And so they may be providing those services in some areas, but we do not consider them mental health staff. So that's why they're not reflected here. Okay. We can certainly do a follow-up and provide the number of school nurses. We do have that record. I just don't have it with me.
Understandable. Last question on this. When you talked about the partnerships, telehealth, do we know how many we're capturing also since we've passed some telehealth legislation?
You know, that's another element that we don't have because it is in that partnership agreement. So we don't systematically collect
Understand.
that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay. So moving on, I was also asked to bring some funding information for you to consider today. So here's some information about the school-based mental health care provider grant that is a line item in the state budget. Fiscal year 2021, 152 districts accessed that state fund and spent a little over $5.5 million. And in 2022, fiscal year 2022, 166 districts accessed that state fund and spent a little over $7 million. From that fund. Here's kind of how that fund is being used. Almost all of it, over 98% in both fiscal years, for direct staff-related expenses, so salaries and fringe and that sort of thing. And then the rest of the items you see here are all supplemental items necessary to get that staff-based mental health provider up and running in their position. So you can see a pretty good breakdown. Nearly all of that money is being used directly for that staff salary and fringe. I also have some information for you about Medicaid expanded access. I don't have numbers here because that is managed directly by the Department of Medicaid, but I wanted to talk about this as an option because it's something that we're very much interested in helping schools and districts access. So expanded access within our school system, it allows school districts to have access to different sources of Medicaid funds that go beyond the IEP or the Individualized Education Plan that comes with some compulsory services. So just kind of a quick comparison here. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Act and some other federal legislation, IDEA, schools are obligated already to provide services to students listed in their IEP, provided in accordance with their IEP, and are documented as medically necessary in that IEP. However, expanded access does give schools options to be able to provide services to a larger group of students, providing services that are not necessarily listed in an IEP, and may be offered to all children, not just those who federally classified as special education. But again, they must be medically necessary and documented. Just briefly to kind of show you what types of services we can use with expanded Medicaid. Testing is a huge element of this, being able to access those funds to really try to determine what's going on with the kid and how we can best support that kid, what kinds of therapies and treatments and support that child needs in order to be successful, as well as evaluation and treatment for a variety of issues, as you see listed on the screen: cognitive issues, emotional issues, behavioral issues, psychoeducational, psychoneurological, psychosocial issues. So that really is a good opportunity for school districts to be able to tap into that Medicaid funding stream and be able to access or provide access to more students. Also within that, school districts have the ability to access and provide individual therapy or counseling for students, as well as group therapy or counseling. So if there are topics in a building that are persistent issues, persistent problems that a school district needs to address, expanded Medicaid can be used to help tap into that as well. And then the final thing I have for you here today, I was asked to bring some challenges to implementation from Katie's perspective. And really, in terms of our implementation directly from the agency, our challenges really revolve around that trauma-informed education plan. Since we don't have the ability to collect those, we do not have the ability to ensure compliance that plans are created. Those are reviewed during the Marshals audits, and so we do know that districts are doing those, but we don't have an independent way of doing that from the agency. It also challenges us because we have to provide delayed technical assistance. So in this instance, we had to contract with a CTAC, wait for them to complete their report. When we get that report this fall, then we'll be able to respond to it. And if we had the ability to collect those reports and provide ongoing technical assistance and feedback to districts, that would allow us to put in place a more effective continuous improvement cycle so that districts are getting better feedback faster from the agency as they work to implement their plans. Also in the law, trauma-informed education plans do not have a required revision cycle. So the local board of education is required to adopt the plan one time, and then they're not required to revisit it. And we think that it has been long enough and that there have been enough changes, especially in the wake of the pandemic, that districts probably need to be encouraged to reopen those plans and take another look. So with that rounds out the information I have for you today. I'm happy to continue to answer questions.
Representative Wilner.
I'm first. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for beginning and ending with trauma-informed plans, because that's where I have a really strong interest in us getting that piece right. And I think it's great. It was great, and it's actually new information for me to know that the SROs are getting that training. So I actually had a bill last session that would require school districts to submit their plans, their trauma-informed plans, to KDE. So I'm glad to see that that's one of your recommendations, and maybe that's something we could consider as a task force being part of our recommendations. I love that part of Senate Bill 1. We heard earlier how it's a really holistic bill, and it is. It does so many, it's very comprehensive. And I feel like the trauma-informed piece of it is the least understood and the least invested in, and that part of the bill has the least amount of teeth. There's really not much we can do. We require the school districts to have a plan, and then that's kind of it. So I guess I'm interested, in addition to having them report them, having some sort of revision, the fact that you said 60% of the plans are just pulling it off of a template somewhere. So it becomes a compliance exercise for schools rather than really improving the safety and the climate and the culture of schools. So what do you see as the other policy levers? Who's providing the training for trauma-informed? Are there enough trainings? Is there more demand than supply? Should we be funding trainings or looking at that? I would just love to hear all your thoughts on that.
Sure, and thank you for that question. So it's a little difficult question because we don't have the ability to collect and review those plans right now. And so we don't know what those plans look like, what those templates look like. Our effort this year will really be focusing on communicating to districts that these should be individualized plans. I will say, sort of in my span and experience in doing this work, that new plans often start as templates. They often start as compliance requirements. We have to meet this deadline. And so I'm not surprised by that. And once a plan is then in place, if we can install a revision, a continuous improvement cycle where that plan is revisited annually, every other year, every third year, whatever it may be, that's where really districts start to dig in a little deeper. Because of the way the compliance cycles run, in that first year, it's all about getting this plan in by that deadline. But since they're not required to revisit, and because we had a delay in being able to review to provide technical assistance, I think that's why that has persisted. If we had the ability to go in and really review ongoing, engage with districts in deeper conversations about their plan and their situation, I think that would strengthen those plans and start to move us away from the templates. And we also, I would say too, in other plans that districts are required to use, there are often skeleton templates, right? And so we do provide some guidance and structure through those templates, but then, as I said, over time, we revise, review, revisit, and improve. So I think that that's something that if we can encourage or require revision, that will resolve itself over time, because nobody wants to look at the same plan every year, right? If the board's going to consider it every year, we're going to make changes to it every year. And so I think that's a policy lever that is accessible to you that will move the needle on that issue.
Thank you. Could I follow up on that? Who's providing trauma-informed plans or training?
Yes, thank you for, I'm sorry I missed that the first time.
It was a really long, ridiculous question. So
That's okay. So we do provide ongoing training to districts from the department, and then we have a variety of partners that districts are able to work with. Our cooperatives provide training. There are national comprehensive centers that provide training on this as well. We do communicate very heavily with our districts about what trainings are available. When there's a new community of practice, a new webinar series, or what have you, we make sure to push those out. And then we do have staff internally equipped to do that work, so we can provide that training when a district calls and needs it.
Is there a demand for the training? Do schools want it?
There is a demand. I will say the demand fluctuates as all topics do, right? But there is certainly a demand. Our staff are very busy. They are working with districts every day and making sure that we're providing that support.
And do you or whoever, I don't know if it's KDE or if it should be the Center for School Safety or the universities, I don't know who it should be, but do you think that there's adequate public funding to make sure that there's training for every school district in Kentucky to be trauma informed? So
I think funding can be a challenge because there's so many pots of funding and they don't always talk to each other. Because we do have federal funds as well that are eligible to be used for trauma informed care work. So I do think that if the state wants to have a concerted training effort to really make sure every district in Kentucky is trained in a specific set of modalities or a specific set of competencies, that state funding would support that and would make it easier for us to be able to provide that sort of comprehensive statewide sort of blanket of training.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney, for your presentation. What? Oh, I didn't see it. Representative Tipton.
Apologize, Mr. Chairman. I got my hand up late. Just the questioning brought a question up. ACEs is a term I haven't heard you use much recently, adverse childhood experiences. in your all's work, are there specific areas that you all are able to identify that are providing more of the trauma than others, or y'all have a feel for that, Matthew?
Yeah, so I do think that as a field, we've moved away from ACEs into this more trauma-informed care. It's a larger umbrella. I'm not able today to speak to any sort of specific saying these are the ACEs that are causing the most trauma. We can certainly take that question back and see if other staff have any insight into that and provide that as a follow-up item.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
The next meeting of the task force will be on September 19th at 2 p.m. Need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
So move.
Meeting adjourned.